That guy's going to be some senator one day.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Jesse Hughes Show. We are renewing a tradition tonight that I have not done in a hot second. That was loud. Ceremonial chair wine sip. We have a great show for you tonight. We are excited. Tonight's guest is probably one guest that I've been pretty excited to have on since I found out about the book that he was writing and then reading it. It is an amazing book. The book is called King of Kings, A Reformed Guide to Government. The author is Mr. Pastor James Baird. Pastor, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Thank you for coming in. So you published a book called King of Kings through Founders Press. Amazing book. I have read it. I would recommend everybody watching to read it. I've dropped a link. If you're watching on Twitter, I've dropped a link below this feed for you to go check out the book, order it. It is awesome. It is short. We will get into that in a moment. But I am just curious. I heard you talk a little bit about this on a couple of podcasts, including Sword in the Trowel with Tom and Graham. And I was just wanted to get a feel of, first off, what is your central thesis of this book? And then what inspired you to get into the conversation and write this book?
So the thesis of my book is very simple. It's that the government must promote Christianity as the only true religion. It has a moral duty to encourage its people to act Christianly in the public and to become Christian. I was inspired to write this book primarily as part of my pastoral preparation. I was looking to become ordained, and post 2020, I think people who are looking to ordination have to bone up on their political theology. And so I did what I'm a Presbyterian, a PCA pastor, what every good Presbyterian does is goes back and reads Calvin and Turretin and Hodge, sort of these giants of our tradition, the Reformed tradition. And as I read them on the question of politics, I found an incredible way to think about the relationship between church and state that was very different than I had been taught previously. So I researched it, I got excited about it, and I thought, hey, how do we get this out to the people? I wanted to get it out to other pastors, but to lay people too, who may have some ideas about the Christian way to think about government that doesn't line up with the Christian tradition, and I don't think it lines up with the Bible either. So I tried to put it together into an easy to read small book, like you mentioned. I tried to make it as small as I could, and that's how we ended up with it.
Well, I certainly think you succeeded. For anyone who's not familiar with it yet, the book is like, I think 85 pages.
Yeah,
It
around there.
is incredibly short, but incredibly concise and incredibly packed with some very, very good stuff. Um, just briefly lay out for us how you support this argument that you make that
Mm.
the government must promote Christianity as the one true religion.
Mm-hmm. Yep. One way to do it may be helpful to go through chapter by chapter really briefly, because that
Okay.
will help anticipate some concerns people may have. So each chapter is just a few pages long. The first one, I state my argument or my thesis, and I define each of my terms so that when I say government must promote Christianity, you know what I'm saying. Then I go through some classic Christian confessions to say this is a very traditional Christian belief. Then I lay out my primary argument, which is simple. It's 3 steps. The government must promote the public good. Christianity is an essential part of the public good. Therefore, the government must promote Christianity. Then I walk through how we see that in the Bible, particularly the Old Testament. Then I address the question of, well, does that mean we have to apply everything in the Old Testament? There's some pretty crazy stuff back there to modern people. And the short answer is no, we don't have to apply all the principles, but this one we do, and you'll have to read the chapter to see why. Then I go through the founding of America. I go through religious liberty. I talk about why this approach to government is loving. I talk about why it's wise, and I talk about why it's compatible with the identity of Christians as ultimately citizens of heaven. So that's my core argument and how I walk through all the different steps.
Very cool. Let's start kind of moving through that a little bit slowly. I don't want to spoil the book because I know that a lot of people should go and read this. We've got 99 viewers watching so far. And purchase this book right now. Every single one of you needs to go out and purchase this book and read it. But let's just kind of start getting a groundwork so people kind of understand and are prepared for what your arguments are.
Mhm.
So we look at today. Let's start with today and then move backwards.
Mhm.
So we look
Okay.
at today and we see this idea reigning in the culture that, you know, we have to have this secular neutral playing field. Everybody's got a seat at the table. Everybody's got an equal opportunity to speak up.
Mhm.
But as we look further and further, and a lot of Christians have bought into this, but as we look further and further back into church history and we look back into history,
Mhm.
that is a very novel idea in
Mhm.
Christianity. Instead, what you see as you've laid out and as we'll discuss here is that a lot of Christians were very keen on this idea that no,
Mhm.
faith should play a central role in politics, so much so that the government is promoting Christianity. And so I think for my first question, you know, you lay it out in the book, but when you say government must promote
Mhm.
Christianity, what does that idea of promotion entail?
Mhm. Most people immediately jump to the idea that it means the government must enforce Christian belief, which is not the thesis of the book. That's a very un-American idea for obvious reasons. So promotion is not the same as trying to convert people at gunpoint or something like that. That's crazy. I don't know of a single serious Christian theologian that's ever proposed that. So promotion is positively recommending it, right? You can think about how a company promotes a product or a professor promotes an idea. all sorts of different examples of that. So it should mean things like our civil leaders. We should seek to elect Christian civil leaders who set a good example of Christian behavior. It would mean that they countenance or favor Christians. They lift up other Christians as positive examples of true patriotic Americans. It would mean that we pass laws that make it easy for people to live a Christian life in the public, and that we not pass laws that make it hard to be Christian in the public. The most powerful thing, I think, are the social customs. We severely underestimate the power of social customs, particularly how we organize time. Are we organizing our society around the celebration of Christian things? One of the big things in early America that the president would do would be to call a day for national fasting and Thanksgiving, where he would recommend that everyone stop their work and they go to church and they listen to a 3-hour sermon. Sermons were long back then. And that they spend that time fasting and praying and repenting of their sins and turning to Jesus for salvation, that the nation will be blessed. So in that sense, they're not forcing people to do that. But when the president recommends something like that, it carries a lot of weight. So that's what I mean when I talk about promotion.
Absolutely. And I think, even within scripture, we see kind of examples of this. You lay this out, but you look back and you look at someone like Xerxes or the king of Persia, or even Nebuchadnezzar to a certain extent, or as you talked about at length, like the king of Nineveh. They publicly declare that God, the God of the Bible, the God of the Hebrews then, our God now, Christ as we now recognize him, is the Lord over all, and that everyone needs to respect and give reverence and pray to God alone, because
That's
he
right.
is the one that gives life and sustains. And we've even seen a few modern examples of this. We have some very hardcore Christian representatives in our government. When you look at the state level, I immediately think of a guy like Dusty Deavers. But even a few weeks ago, after Charlie Kirk was tragically murdered, as I like to say, martyred, we saw high-level government officials, Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, J.D. Vance, proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ, promoting the idea of religion to the public, and saying Christianity is a moral good. It is something that is good for our society. We need to be leaning more into this.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So we move through the book, and you lay out kind of this argument. There was there's another thinker who writes a lot on this topic, and I'll leave him unnamed for now just to not get you in trouble. But he likes to say, "Put it in a syllogism." Some of my followers immediately know who I'm talking about. Put it in a syllogism, and you did put it in a syllogism. You had a very helpful syllogism in your book. Can you kind of run through that real quick?
Yes. So it's I mentioned it earlier, but it's good to restate it. The first premise is the government must promote the public good. This is an idea that is a permanent fixture of Western legal and political thought. It's bigger than that, but it's especially essential to the West. It's in Romans 13. Paul says that the civil authorities are God's servant. That's interesting. They should serve God. So they're God's servant for your good. In Presbyterianism, we believe in something called the Westminster Confession of Faith. And this is in chapter 23, section 1. The government is there for the public good. So you put yourself in really weird waters that could compromise our political and legal structure itself. It's in the preamble to the Constitution that we have this form of government for the general welfare. That idea of general welfare, common good, public good, they're all the same thing. So if you deny the first premise, you're in really hot water about what even the point of government is. So that one's pretty stable. And so government must promote the public good. The second one is Christianity is an essential part of the public good. The best way to think about this is Christianity is good for everyone. If everyone started acting like Christians, and we pray would truly convert to Christianity, that would make everything better. If you deny that Christianity is not good for the public, you run into even hotter water. I mean, do you really believe that Christianity is a gospel that should be proclaimed for all? This should be a very normal Christian belief. Well, if those two premises are true, and they're very hard to deny, then the conclusion necessarily follows that therefore the government must promote true religion. The reason why I like syllogisms is some people have pointed out that it kind of puts people in a corner, which is true. It does put you in a corner, but it's not a bad corner in this sense. At least you know what you're disagreeing with. At least you know what you're disagreeing with. I don't like books when an author will wax eloquent and you feel like it's off and you don't really like it, but the book's not really clear enough for you to even really know what you disagree with. If someone's going to disagree with my book, I think it's a service to them to help them identify exactly where the disagreement lies. So you could say I'm cornering you, but I'd like to think of it as an act of service to help even people who disagree with me to clarify their own thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a really smart way to go about it, I would say, especially because we have so many people who haven't even thought of this. I mean,
Mhm.
you're Presbyterian, I'm Southern Baptist, I'm Reformed Baptist. I largely agree with pretty much the entire book and what you've been saying so far. But I mean, I look back and I have my church never approached this topic at all
Yeah. Yep.
growing up. This was never something that was really discussed.
Mhm.
It's not until I started doing my own research that I really came across these
Mhm.
things and these ideas and these
Mhm.
different doctrines and beliefs and what different people thought throughout church history. And I really appreciate you bringing up a great Baptist man, John Gill, in your book. He
I
has
threw
some
you a
very great
bone.
things. Yeah, thank you, thank you. We do appreciate it. We are very happy about that. We love John Gill around here. Um, but you don't. A lot of people are very unfamiliar to these ideas
Mhm.
coming up through the church, which is unfortunate.
Mhm.
However, we have, having resources like this,
Mhm.
I think is incredibly helpful, especially because it makes such a pointed argument in such a
Mhm.
concise and clear way
Mm.
that it
Thank you.
forces people to kind of say, okay, what do I do with this?
Mhm.
And one thing I also appreciate, I was going to bring this up later, but I'll bring it up now. One thing I also really appreciate is at the end of the book, you have basically the required reading for further study. And it's divided into beginner things that beginners can get into, intermediate, and then kind of more advanced things. I
Mhm.
really appreciate that. I am very upset and ashamed to say I have only read one of those books on that list, and I had to read it for a class. It was Did America Have a Christian
Yep.
Founding?
That's a
Great
great
book.
book.
Would 100%
Great book.
recommend it to anybody. But that I'm ashamed to say that's the only one I've read. I will get to the other ones as soon as I can. Being in law school makes reading outside
Yeah.
resources very difficult. But it does kind of help me transition. Before I do, shout out Stephen, who said, "Love you, James, but the future of America is indeed Reformed Baptist."
Yeah, I think it's funny. I've heard wait, what was that guy's name? I want to give him a shout out.
We got Stephen here.
What's up,
Stephen,
Steven?
I have no idea how to say that last name. I'm so sorry, Stephen.
What's up, Steven?
My
Uh
apologies.
it's it's funny. I've heard some Baptists who are worried that, well, once we do this, then that means the Presbyterians are gonna, lock us up in the stocks again for not baptizing our babies. And my response is, dude, have you looked at the demographics of America? Like, if the Presbyterians are going to have to go and get a permission slip to baptize our babies. Like, that's the more likely outcome.
I will when all is said and done, I will hesitantly give you permission slips, but I will give the permission slips. I will sign them off. I'm not going to be like the new ICE department, the Defenders of
Yeah.
America, where it's going to be no on every single visa. I
Yeah.
promise I will give some of you permission
I,
slips.
I just ask that you would be a tolerant
I,
Caesar. That's all I
I
ask
will
for.
be I will be as tolerant as I can be. But you do bring up a good point. Baptists are a very large
Yeah.
majority in this country, a lone bulwark, some may say. Not sure about that, but but going back to what I was saying a second ago, you look at your reading list, you have tons of reformed fathers on there, but you also have this book, Did America Have a Christian Founding? And you
Mhm,
talk a lot about America
mhm,
in the book. So kind of moving forward, a lot of people, similar to the idea about the secular neutrality, a lot of people have very, in my opinion, warped viewpoints on America's founding, the role of religion in that,
mhm.
um, this idea of separation of church and state that came from a single letter and is not found anywhere in our Constitution. And I'm willing to pay $100 to anybody that can find the exact word separation of church and state in the First Amendment. Go for
Yep.
it. If you can do it, I'll do it. I doubt you'll be able to. But
Mm,
can you kind of just walk through? So you have this chapter
absolutely.
on America, and can you kind of
Mm,
walk through that chapter for us real quick?
yep. So a lot of us have entirely totally misunderstood the First Amendment, and it's not. Um, there are reasons for that, and it actually starts with the Supreme Court. For you lawyers, if you really want to get into this, you have to go read "Everson Must Fall," which was co-authored by Timon Klein and the Harvard Law Review. It's
Absolutely
incredible.
tremendous article.
Yep, it's
I actually
incredible.
just wrote my own article that will hopefully be published through the Standing for Freedom Center on that topic very soon. So I'll let you guys know when that comes out.
Awesome. So I bring that up just to say that this, as many things do, even when we don't admit it, it started with leadership and it filters down to the people. And it created a deep misunderstanding about the Constitution that to this day is enshrined in the Supreme Court's precedent, which is very shameful. So go read that article for the details. But here's the right way to interpret the First Amendment. We tend to think that the First Amendment was forbidding any sort of religiosity officially embedded in any government decision. So people will cite the First Amendment as the reason why schools shouldn't have prayer and Bible reading, for example. That's not how the First Amendment should be read at all. The point of the First Amendment was to say that the federal government could not make decisions about religion that would impact the states. So it was fundamentally a separation. It's even still a bad word, but a separation of the federal government from different religious matters. Not all religious matters, but some religious matters, particularly whether or not a state could establish itself as a particular Protestant sect or a general Christian sect or have no established religion at all. And what the Constitution with the Bill of Rights says is that that's not the federal government's decision. It's not the federal government's decision. You can see this in just how the First Amendment is stated. It explicitly says that Congress shall make no law regarding an establishment of religion. It only limits Congress. It does not limit the states. And with the 10th Amendment, since that was not limited in any other place, it only limits Congress. That means the power to establish a religion is left with the states. And so, if you want to see the right way to think about government and religion at the founding period, don't look at the federal constitution. It explicitly is saying we're not dealing with that right here. If you want to know how religion and government related, look at the state constitutions. It was the states that were given the power to do that. And what you find is you find religious tests for office in almost all of them. Lots of them are generally Christian. They're kind of Protestant coded. You know, you definitely don't see any required statements of allegiance to the Pope. It's just a profession of faith in Jesus and a commitment to the Old and New Testaments, not the Apocrypha. So even then, it's Protestant coded, but in some of them, it's just generally Christian. But in other words, it's just explicit. Like Georgia, my home state, says the representatives must be Protestant. You have at least a couple states who explicitly establish a church, like Congregationalism is established as the Church of Massachusetts. And then you have other states that just say, we're not going to pick one denomination, Methodist, Baptist, Congregationalist, Presbyterian, but we're just going to say we're Protestant. So you have all of these things in the state constitutions. That's not even addressing what you see in the state's law code. Because at the time, you have laws against blaspheming the Trinity. You have laws protecting the Sabbath. I think even today, if I remember correctly, there's like 7 states that still have blasphemy laws on the books. And none of these things were seen as at all in tension with or in contradiction to the First Amendment, because the First Amendment was only about the federal laws that Congress could pass. So that's the first thing to note, is that if you want to understand early America, don't go to the federal government. You want to go to the states on this question, and the states speak with unmistakable clarity.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you dig into everything that you just talked about, the blasphemy laws, the establishments in some of the church states, the tests for office. These are things that you present this idea, and I think you said this yourself in the book. You present this idea to a modern American, and people start getting really uncomfortable. They start sweating up here, pulling on their collars, excuse me. But to the founders, to the founding generation, not only was that stuff normal, it was common sense. One common objection I hear when people say, oh, America's not a Christian nation, is that you don't have God mentioned in the Constitution or Christianity mentioned in the Constitution. Well, first off, God is mentioned. It says in the year of our Lord when we're writing it. However, small semantic argument aside, whatever. But I would posit to you that I would posit to anybody that makes that argument. The reason that is because they were so ingrained in Christianity, in a Christian culture, so much so that guys like Thomas Jefferson, who we like to point at today as the example of the non-believers who were part of the founding generation, and there's some debate on that. I generally think Thomas Jefferson probably was a non-believer just based off what I've seen.
Yeah.
Regardless, he carried around an Anglican book of common prayer because he knew Christianity was so important to the culture of that time that he would be socially ostracized if he did not publicly fall in line. It's a concept that a lot of people like to call cultural Christianity, which I tend to think is a net positive, not a net negative. But there's debates on that. It is certainly a good thing. But the reason that it's not explicitly spelled out in the Constitution, this is a Christian nation, is because it was so important to them at that time. I have no doubt in my mind if we brought them to today and let them look at modern day America, there would be a variety of changes to the Constitution. But one of them, I think, is they would spell it out a little bit more explicitly.
Yeah,
but totally. They had to.
That's right. Yeah. So there can be 2 reasons why something is left unsaid. We always got to remember this. There could be 2 reasons why something's left unsaid. One, you don't believe it. One, it's so obvious. Why would anyone need to say it? And when you go back and read the primary sources at the founding, it is definitely the second one. And, people will mention guys like Jefferson or Madison as, oh, look, our founders weren't Christian. And Jefferson certainly was not an Orthodox Christian, wasn't a deist. That's just not the case. But he wasn't an Orthodox Christian. But those are the exceptions that prove the rule. So you have Madison, for example. Do you know how many days of national fasting and Thanksgiving he declared? Multiple times. He calls the nation to come together and to turn to God, much like the king of Nineveh. Later on, he says he regrets it because he says he was acting against his principle. Well, then why did he have to do it? And the answer is the people expected him to. The people expected him to. Why? Because they're a Protestant people. They're a Christian people, and they are demanding that from their leader. And it was known that he wasn't a perfectly Orthodox Christian, and they were willing to still allow him to serve in that office because he was so capable. But they weren't going to let him socially get away with not acting like a Christian when he's in office and doing things like calling them to 2 days of Thanksgiving. He still had to operate on their terms because it's a Christian nation. So these guys are the exceptions that prove the rule. They don't overturn the thesis. Oh, I want to make one other point.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Pull back for a second. I think it is important to say that when I'm using things like Sabbath laws as examples of how America was a Christian nation, the point is not to say that I think I meant blasphemy laws in particular. Blasphemy laws in particular make people nervous because so many people take God's name in vain. It's a common habit. And so they get nervous when you start saying, "Oh, are you advocating for blasphemy laws?" I'm not. That would be a terrible idea, partly because whatever punishment you would pick uh, for blasphemy, you couldn't enforce it because everyone's breaking it all the time. And so it would create so much social chaos. So many people would rebel. It would be counterproductive. It would create more ungodliness, not less. So, yeah, definitely not for blasphemy laws. But it is a good historical example of at the time of the founding, how the founding fathers and the founding generation of people serving in government at every level, how they were promoting the Christian faith and Christian morals.
That does lead me into also. I just want to give a quick shout out to our man Tucker Carlson. We love him because last night he was doing a TPUSA event. He was in a debate with some kid, and regardless of what you think about the debate, the kid blasphemed Jesus Christ. He took Christ's name in vain, and Tucker immediately cut him off, said, "I'm not going to engage with you if you're going to use that phrase. We're not doing this." Shout out Tucker. We love it. We love to see it. But that does get into another part of your book. Something that I also really did appreciate is you talk about, and you quote Alfusius on this, but you talk about the fact that there are things, kind of this difference between principle and practicality, where there are things that we want to see happen.
That's right.
That maybe we can't get to that spot yet. And so leaders have to be prudent and wise about the situation that they're in with their nation before they're able to put some stuff or put some policies into law. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So you can't just drag and drop your principle and immediately, kill everyone who disagrees with you or something like that. That is contrary to the public good. Like, just no society can survive like that. You always want to create wise legislation that's created at the right moment in the right way, that guides the people toward goodness and justice and piety. That's the whole point. It's a whole lot like parenting. I have 3 little boys. Our house is just a constant wrestling match. I love it. It's awesome. And I just put my oldest in jujitsu, so now he's getting better at wrestling, and his arm bar is surprisingly good right now.
Boy.
So we're having to watch out for that. But if you have a bad behavior, and many different bad behaviors, and basically they all get the worst imaginable punishment for every time for the smallest infraction, that's not good parenting. Like, that's not going to help them be more competent, more capable, have high character men of action. It's going to break their spirit. They're going to rebel. It's going to be totally counterproductive. Well, the government has a similar role. They have to be wise and careful about how they're shepherding the people towards what is good and what is right and God honoring. And that means we're not talking about just plopping down these super restrictive laws so that everyone acts and thinks exactly like you think the perfect way to act and think is. We're talking about government having the right goal, working with the right principles, and then judiciously and prudentially working towards a better society. That's the core idea.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I would totally agree with that. You hear this common refrain, especially now with Trump in office, that you can just do things. And that is true. You can just do things. However, you do have to be wise about how you do things, because obviously mass deportations, Trump was able to make that for example, a nationally popular policy point. People want it. However, if Trump was to come out tomorrow and say, I don't know, we're going to jail every Muslim in the country. Right. I mean, with certain people in certain corners of the internet, that's going to be popular, but that's not going to be popular necessarily with the masses at large. You have to be prudent about what policies that you put in place. I want to take a quick second just to remind people, the name of the book is King of Kings, A Reform Guide to Government. You can find it on Founders Press. I've dropped a link below the stream for you to check out the book and order it. It is an amazing book. Highly recommend. If you have any questions for me or our guest tonight, drop them in the chat. We'll get to them.
Can I
kind of
jump
moving
on that real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
I want to jump on that one. I think it's also important to understand an old idea that got kind of hijacked and misused, but is really important. It's the idea of toleration. So the idea of toleration is, it's a great idea. We should totally recover it, because what it means is that you don't necessarily approve of the behavior, but you still allow it prudentially. You may kind of regulate it or whatever, like put some limits, but you tolerate that behavior. This is a lot of ways when you think about the different, I don't think this is a good idea, but it's a good example of places where technically marijuana is illegal, but it's not enforced, right? It's tolerated, right? It's technically wrong. We're not smiling upon this behavior, but we're not going to enforce it. Similar idea. So, you can think about different religions that aren't Christians that you have toleration for. In early America, Judaism was tolerated, completely tolerated, right? Doesn't mean that the government said we're a Jewish nation. They were a Christian nation, but they tolerated peaceful Jews as well. And in other places, you had some Catholic toleration as well. We're really a Protestant nation. Almost everyone, like 95+% was Protestant, but there was toleration for Catholics. So not only do you want to be prudent, you also have to understand nobody's perfect, right? And you create space where you don't condone the behavior, but you tolerate it. And that's how societies are able to get along.
No, absolutely. And that is something when we're looking at some of the issues of today, that is something that we do have to be mindful of. There are things that obviously I think that we can and should immediately move on, but there are other things that I think we're going to have to warm people up to, and we can get more into that later. But kind of more of a, I guess, fun question. When you were doing the research for this book, and shout out Jacob Honeycutt. I know you gave him a shout out. We are mutuals here on this lovely app. Shout out to him. But when you were doing research, what would you say were some of your favorite sources, favorite materials that you went through, that you read, that kind of helped you form and shape this work that you did?
Hold on, let me go to my political theology shelf.
All right.
Kind of tucked away here, so it might fall over. I would say
it is my goal one day to have something like this.
A political theology shelf?
Oh, wait, just the entire bookshelf in general.
Oh. I have a feeling you'll get there.
Maybe one day.
Okay, I'll pick these. These are all advanced. So in the advanced section, if you want to get started, I think the Did America Have a Christian Founding? Great place to start. What other beginner? Let me start with the beginner list for people, so they don't get totally discouraged when they see the advanced books that I list. Yeah, so I say, Did America Have a Christian Founding? Start with that. If you're Presbyterian, a great book to read is A.A. Hodge, his commentary on the Westminster Confession, particularly chapter 23. And if you want to understand the Reformed idea of how government and the church relate, then check out Brad Littlejohn's The Two Kingdoms, A Guide for the Perplexed. I think those are a great place to start. But the books that I found most helpful, first, this is a incredible book. It's called The Myth of American Individualism by Barry Allen Shane. Subtitle is The Protestant Origins of American Political Thought. Surprisingly, lots and lots of books written on the founding of America don't spend a whole lot of time, or don't spend as much time as they should, even if they spend a lot, in the primary sources. And the reason is there's so much. I mean, these guys were writing and writing all the time. The presses were always hot. And the other thing is that the primary, what was Twitter back then in terms of a big way of getting information, the way everyone got information back then, the internet of the day, was sermons. Sermons. That's where your common person learned what was going on in the world and how they should think about it. It was the pastor. He gets to talk to the people 3-4 times a week because they listen to a whole lot of sermons. And
a
so,
lot of people I know today that would not like that.
yeah, well, we're not as great as our forebears. So sermons were a big deal. And so you got to read, what, 3 to 4 sermons a week by how many pastors? I mean, that is just a ton of material. And the thing that makes Barry Allen Shane so great is he did the reading. This book is filled with primary sources, particularly the sermons of the time. And it gives you a really good idea of how the early Americans thought about not only religion and Protestantism, but just culture, community, and politics overall. So this one is awesome for the American founding, my favorite book on that. My favorite book for Christian legal theory, you just got to go Thomas Aquinas, his treatise on the law, super helpful. And then in the Reformed tradition, if you read one book, you got to read Althusius's Politica. This isn't the whole thing. This is actually an abridged translation, but I hope you'll get the main idea. I haven't read the whole Latin text because I only know a tiny bit of Latin. So those are my three. And this would take a while to really learn from them, but there you go. That was a
Very
fun
good
question.
stuff. Awesome. Yeah, no, I like to sprinkle in the fun ones every once in a while. Kind of moving forward a little bit. So you say in the book, you're a pastor, you're not a politician, you're not a political pundit. I am also not a politician. I'm a wannabe political pundit, but we are looking at kind of the modern situation. You do mention in the book, I'm not here to necessarily give prescriptions or give ideas for things that we should apply today when it comes to how to apply this tradition and this way of thinking. And that is exactly what I'm about to ask you to do if you feel comfortable.
Trying to get me in trouble.
Maybe not go incredibly into detail. Don't get yourself like in trouble or fired from your job or whatever. I'm not sure if you're a full-time pastor, so you might be safe. But just kind of on a base level, where do you think are some good places for us to at least start?
It's a great question. I think I want to talk first about why I am reticent to talk about policy and stuff. It's because there is a separation of church and state, in the sense that they're two different realms of competency. I'm competent to preach God's word. God's word says things about the duty of a ruler that he must fulfill because God is his king. So I can preach that all day long. This is what God is telling you to do. Here's the duty that you have. You must promote true religion. I'm not competent to turn that into policy for Collier County, my, local county. That's not my job. The county shouldn't tell me how to preach a sermon. I shouldn't tell them how to write policy. And that's the true sense in which you don't want a political pastor. You don't want a pastor who should be a politician and is talking way more about policy and campaigning and yada, yada, yada from the pulpit. That's not their job. So I will not be prescriptive. Nothing here at all is meant to bind anyone's conscience, or there's a million different ways that, depending on what your job is, where you're located, when I say job, which type of civil official you are, that will constrain what the customs and habits of the people that you're serving in civil service. So lots of ways you could accomplish this, but I can throw out some ideas. And they're kind of softballs, but I think they're important. First of all, go to church. If you're a civil official, go to church and make sure people know you go to church. And be bold about how you talk about your faith, as bold as you can. Everyone has to be wise and prudent. Some people may have to be careful about how they talk about it. I understand that's where the prudence comes in. You got to do it the right way. But I also think that I'll issue this challenge. Don't use wisdom as an excuse to fail to do your duty. Too often, people will say, I'm just trying to be wise here. And they use that as an excuse to avoid doing hard things. It's a way to cover cowardice. So I'm not saying anyone in particular is doing that, but I should say that's a reflect, do some self reflection, see if that's the case for you. But I think setting a good example by being open about your faith, by going to church, making sure people know you go to church, that's a big deal. The next one would be promote other Christians around you. They're doing the same thing. Now, listen, this may sound like a bunch of niceties. It is not. This is such a huge deal. It has a massive impact on people. Think about how big of a deal it was to America when J.D. Vance was like, I'm going to talk about why I love Charlie and why I'm going to be open about my faith and I'm going to recite the Nicene Creed. Like, whoa, we had people going to church after that. It's a massive, massive impact when you are open and setting a positive example. That's the first thing. I'll say one thing recently that my own county did that I thought was a great idea. It was posting the 10 Commandments in county buildings. I think that's fabulous. It's reminding everyone laws aren't something we just make up because we feel like it. Laws are supposed to conform to universal principles of justice established by God himself. Big deal. Very big deal. Those are my two modest suggestions. I think there's so much more you could do. You should be thinking about zoning. You should be thinking about all sorts of different stuff that could be really effective. But those are the two biggest ones. Set a positive example. I got to turn this filter off that's on my computer. This is like the third time in a podcast I've had balloons go up.
I was about to say, where'd these balloons come from?
I need someone who knows computers to show me how to turn this off. I know it's a setting on my Mac. It really killed my vibe too. I was going hard. Anyway, that's what I'd say. Something like that.
I was loving it, and then all of a sudden I saw balloons pop up. I was like, "Oh, dang! Everybody else is loving it too."
Everybody else is loving it too. Yeah. But if you could also pitch me ideas, and I'll either say I don't know the answer to that, or I'll tell you it's a horrible idea.
Yeah, well, I can give you certainly plenty of ideas and give you plenty of policy prescriptions that will inevitably end up in every single person watching this going to jail. No, I'm kidding.
Gosh.
No, there are certainly things that we need. I think that we can. There are certainly ideas that I think we should start pursuing. My internet is being a little bit slow, so I apologize to everybody.
It's okay.
I think we're starting to get up a little bit, but we've got good. There are people out there that I think are doing good things and coming up with good ideas, and I hope to be among them one day.
Yeah.
Seems to have lost. We almost got through the whole thing without my internet crapping out.
Did the stream drop?
All right. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
All right. I can. Yep. Okay. There we are. We're back. All right. Yeah. No, there are certainly ideas and policies and things, and we've got good people doing some good things. You know, like I mentioned earlier, Dusty Devers down in Oklahoma. This is going to be an ongoing conversation, and we need more resources. And I'm glad that we've got people like you out here providing those resources for people and getting on it. All right. Where can people find you? And I've already posted the link, but where can people find the book?
You can find me on Twitter, James Baird. I need to get a catchier handle. My handle's James_D_Baird. I need like something snappy. The book's on Amazon. Go check it out. Kindle, Audible, paperback. If you want a really nice hardback, then you have to go to founders.org and you can use the discount code KINGS for 10% off. And it's like less than the paperback, but it's super nice. I don't have a copy. Here we go. Look at this. We'll do a little Billy Mays over here. Very nice. It's got embossing on it, you know. So I would go to Founders, but if you love that overnight shipping, or you like Audible or Kindle, go to Amazon.
I did indeed buy it straight from Founders, and I'm glad I did
Good
because I
man.
love the hard copies. All right, James, thank you again so much for being on tonight. We had a great discussion. Stick around for a second. We'll talk after the show. But thank you again, and we appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Jesse. Appreciate you.
Of course. Government should promote Christianity as the one true religion. That is the lesson that we have learned tonight. And there are policy prescriptions that I would bring forth that I think naturally flow out of this idea. Some of them are going to be more popular. Some of them are going to be less popular. Some of them are going to be things that I lay out the principle. And I think that with time, as we move forward, they're going to become more and more likely. Abolishing abortion. Abolishing pornography, totally. It's getting rid of gay marriage, fighting this transgender insanity. These are the big cultural things right now that we need to be going hard against, as well as immigration. There is a perfectly good Christian case for why we need limited immigration that protect our in future episodes. But these are starting points. These are things that I think we should start working on now. We had Ben Zeisloff on recently. He's working to abolish abortion. We're hoping to have some more guests on to talk about abolishing pornography, abolishing gay marriage, getting rid of these cultural behemoths that have served as stumbling blocks for our nation for way too long. We need to be going hard against this stuff. And we need to be doing the reading. Do the reading. I'm thankful for James and his work and the things that he is doing in this to help promote this idea. There are tons of other books that you can read that you can go out, but make sure first and foremost you go out and you buy King of Kings, A Reformed Guide to Government today from Founders Press. Once again, the link is under the tweet that I have provided. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you guys for watching. It's been a wonderful evening. We're grateful for James and him coming on and the work that he's done. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Be on the lookout. Be on the lookout. This Friday, I am doing a pre-recorded interview with the one and only Delegate Nick Freitas from here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Nick Freitas, tremendous guy. I can't wait. Make sure if you have questions for Nick, send them in to me. I'll make sure they get asked. Keep a lookout for that. It'll probably be releasing Monday. We're recording Friday, releasing Monday. It's going to be a blast. Once again, thank you guys. I hope you have a wonderful evening. God bless you all. God loves you, and so do I. Thank you once again.